Okay, so get this. Old Hollywood, right? Add in a good mystery, and I'm telling you, I am totally hooked.
You and me both.
Yeah.
It's like a recipe for...
We're talking about the Black Dahlia case.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, Elizabeth Short's story. And this deep dive, the stuff you sent over, man, it really brings that whole time period to life, especially with her trying to make it big in Hollywood just after World War II. Like, wow, what a time to be alive, huh?
Right. And what's fascinating is
Right.
you think about post-war America, it was like this powder keg, this explosion of change happening in society.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was hope, optimism, this shiny future, but also a ton of uncertainty, especially if you were a woman back then.
And that's where Elizabeth Short's story, it just hits differently, even now, right? I mean, here's this young woman, born in 24, moves out to California, stars in her eyes, wants to be somebody.
The classic Hollywood story in a lot of ways.
Totally. But the source material, it paints this picture of her, beautiful, sure, but also struggling to make ends meet, relationships all over the place. Kind of feels sadly timeless, you know?
Absolutely. And it's important to remember the whole context. Post-war, gender roles are shifting big time. Women were told, okay, back to the kitchen, ladies, even though they held down the fort during the war.
Right. So you've got the societal pressure cooker, women trying to figure out their place in the new world. Then plop on top of that the whole Hollywood thing, all the allure, the dark side.
A recipe for, disastrous, putting it lightly.
Exactly. And the media back then, especially those tabloids, they ate this stuff up. Beauty, ambition, and then tragedy.
It was the perfect storm.
And speaking of, we got to talk about that name, the Black Dahlia. It's haunting, unforgettable, like ripped straight out of a movie, especially with film noir being all the rage back then.
It's no coincidence, by the way. The name itself is believed to be linked to this film noir movie, The Blue Dahlia, came out around the same time. Then you add in Elizabeth Short's thing for wearing black, like the document mentions, and bam,
Yeah.
the nickname stuck.
Like it amplified the whole mystery, the darkness of the case. You know what's really unsettling to me, though? Even before the tragedy, Elizabeth Short's life, it was already a mystery in itself. This document, it mentions her moving around a lot, struggling to find steady work. You ever wonder if those circumstances, that vulnerability, played a part in what happened to her?
That's the question, isn't it? It's what's haunted investigators for decades. And honestly, it speaks to those bigger anxieties of the time, right? The fear of the unknown, this feeling that darkness, it's always lurking beneath the surface, even in the brightest, most glamorous places.
Exactly. And that brings us to where this story takes a very, very dark turn. January 15th, 1947. Picture this. A mother and son are walking through Leimert Park in L.A. Now, back then, it was a whole different world compared to what it is today.
Oh yeah, huge contrast.
Yeah.
Back then, Leimert Park was mostly residential, a community just finding its footing in post-war LA. Not the kind of place where you'd expect to stumble upon something truly horrifying.
And yet,
Yeah.
that's exactly what happened. And the details, well, they're beyond disturbing. Elizabeth Short's body, it was discovered in a vacant lot. And the source material, it doesn't hold back. I mean, it describes her body being cut in half.
And as if that wasn't horrifying enough, the killer had also made these incisions on her lips, almost like they were trying to, I don't know, silence her, even in death.
It's chilling, but here's something that stuck with me from the source. It mentions there was hardly any blood at the scene. I mean, how is that even possible with such a brutal crime?
That's the thing that told investigators right off the bat that this was no crime of passion. No, the lack of blood. That screams premeditation. Whoever did this, they most likely killed Elizabeth Short somewhere else, took their time cleaning up, and then they staged that horrifying scene in the vacant lawn.
It's like they wanted to make a statement, you know?
Yeah.
Send a message. But to who and why?
Those are the million-dollar questions, right?
Yeah.
The ones that have haunted this case for almost 80 years. And it's that lack of answers, that big gaping hole in the story that keeps us coming back. It makes us want to dig deeper, try to understand the mind of someone who could do something so horrific. It's like they put her on display almost, like it was meant to be found, meant to grab the attention of the press.
Oh, 100%. And man, did they ever. The media coverage, bonkers, even back then. The Black Dahlia went viral before viral was even a thing.
Right. And think about it. This was 1947. No internet, no 24/7 news cycle like we've got now. But that story spread like wildfire, newspapers coast to coast, even over here, front page news, the whole shebang. The Black Dahlia and those pictures, man. Haunting.
It's a weird thing to think about, isn't it? On the one hand, this awful murder, this young woman, her life just over. But the media, they turn her into this myth, this symbol of everything dark about Hollywood.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The whole thing, it played right into what people were already scared of. America, fresh out of the war, trying to figure itself out, and then, bam, this brutal murder.
And not just anywhere. In the heart of the dream factory. Like someone ripped the curtain back and showed the ugliness underneath.
And let's not forget, this was Hollywood. Land of fantasy, right? So you've got this real-life horror show crashing into the silver screen, film noir everywhere, and the lines between what's real, what's a movie, gone.
And that's what gets you, I think. That unease. It makes you wonder what else is hidden, what's lurking below the surface. Makes you question everything.
Speaking of hidden, let's talk about this investigation. The LAPD, I mean, they had to be freaking out, right? Big-time case, tips coming out their ears, probably a whole lot of nothing mixed into.
Oh, you know it. The document even talks about how overwhelming it was. So much information, half of it contradicting the other half. Imagine trying to make sense of that. Everyone from wannabe starlets to guys playing saxophone on a street corner claiming they knew Elizabeth Short. A total nightmare. Wait, didn't they also have a tough time figuring out where she even was in the days before her death?
Totally. The document mentions how she moved around a lot, which, hey, for a struggling actress trying to catch a break, not that unusual. But for the cops, made their jobs near impossible, couldn't pin down who she was with, where she was, finding out who'd want to hurt her. Forget about it.
Like trying to finish a puzzle with like half the pieces missing. But even with all that mess, there were still some people they looked at, right?
This document, it mentions a doctor never named, but seems like he raised some eyebrows early on.
Yeah, and I think that just adds to the whole creep factor, you know? The killer, whoever they were, they knew their way around a body. Those incisions, the way she was posed, that's not amateur hour. That's someone with knowledge.
Chills, man. Chills. And wait, wasn't there also that other doctor, George Hodel? His own son pointed the finger at him years later,
Yeah.
right? You're right. Hodel's name is practically synonymous with the Black Dahlia. And the source material, it does mention some possible links between them. Nothing concrete enough to actually charge him, though.
Makes you think, though, what if? What if, in that mountain of dead ends and fake leads, there's something about Hodel they missed? Easy to go down that rabbit hole, let me tell you.
Oh, for sure. The Black Dahlia case, it's like a breeding ground for theories, man. Everyone's got one. But at the end of the day, that big question mark still hangs over it all. Who killed Elizabeth Short and why?
It's wild, right? I mean, all these years later, decades, and the Black Dahlia case, it still feels so unresolved, so open-ended. Why do you think that is? What is it about this case that just grabs people, even now, almost 80 years later?
Man, you could write a whole book trying to answer that. I mean, you've got everything, right? You've got the brutality of the crime itself, the mystery around Elizabeth Short's life and death, and come on, you can't talk about this case without talking about Hollywood. The whole place, it's like this giant question mark where dreams are made, sure, but also where they go to die.
And let's not forget, it's still unsolved. It's like a story with a missing ending, a puzzle with pieces scattered everywhere. We want closure, right? And when we don't get it, it sticks with us.
Totally. We can't help but try to put those pieces together ourselves, come up with theories, try to find some meaning in all the chaos.
It's human nature. And speaking of chaos, there's this one detail in the source material, I don't know, it really got to me. It said that during the autopsy, they found out Elizabeth Short's body had been washed, like cleaned up, before being left in that vacant lot. I mean, who does that?
Yeah, that one always gets me too. It's that extra layer of messed up, the level of planning, the need to control everything, even in death. It's chilling.
It's like the killer. They wanted to erase something. Or maybe create something. Present Elizabeth Short in a very specific way, even as they were.
It's like they were trying to write their own narrative.
Yeah.
Control how people saw her, even in death. And that begs the question, what were they trying to say?
It's like looking into the stark mirror. You know what I mean? The whole case, it reflects so much about that time, that place. The anxiety after the war, the pull of Hollywood, the good, the bad, the really, really ugly. And it makes you think about those dreams, the ones people chase, and how easily they can turn into nightmares.
And it shows you how sometimes, even with all the resources in the world, the justice system, it can't always deliver. The fact that a case this big, this public, is still unsolved all these years later, it's a reminder that sometimes the truth, it just stays hidden.
It's heavy stuff, no doubt about it. But it's also what makes these cases so fascinating, right? We want answers. We want justice for Elizabeth Short. But I think even deeper than that, we want to understand. We want to know what makes someone capable of something so awful.
Maybe, by looking into that darkness, just maybe, we learn a little something about ourselves along the way, right? About the world we live in.
Well said. Well said. This whole deep dive, it's been a lot. Tragic story, no question. But if there's a silver lining, I guess it's that it reminds you, even when things are dark, even in a place like Hollywood where everything's supposed to be glitz and glamour, there's still that human element, right? That search for truth, that need to make sense of things. That's what endures.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And I guarantee this case, it's going to stay with people. It's going to keep them asking questions, keep them digging for years to come.
Absolutely. And hey, who knows? Maybe someone listening right now, they'll be the one to finally crack the code, uncover the truth that's been buried for so long. This has been a fascinating, albeit pretty dark, deep dive into the Black Dahlia case. Huge thanks to you for, well, for knowing all this stuff, and to everyone listening. Until next time, keep those thinking caps on, and remember, the truth is out there somewhere.